everybody, welcome to A Minute with Randy Bartlett. This 60 seconds is all about why you should get ceremony scripts from the officiants in advance. And there's really a lot of reasons to do it. It's harder than you might think. I'll talk about that at the very end. But first I want to give you a bunch of really great reasons to have a script of what the ceremony is going to be. And I'm talking about when we are providing music and or sound support for the ceremony. It's at the church, probably just about impossible to get. But when you have it, here's some things to think about. We have a lot, I'm sure all of you do, of amateurs now doing ceremony scripts. Or the ceremonies themselves. And it's somebody's brother or friend and they've never done one before. So having that script in advance will help you take a look to make sure they haven't missed any key things. One of the most important of which is telling the guest to sit. We've probably all experienced that where the guest stand as the bride comes in and then he goes into the ceremony and it never bothers to tell them to sit down. So just having that in there in advance and being able to add that helps a lot. But listen, I've seen amateurs miss just about everything. Forgetting the ring ceremony, forgetting to do the actual vows or the pronouncement at the end, introductions. So making sure all of those elements are in there. Knowing when and whether it's amateur or not, knowing how the ceremony ends is really important. What are the last words that are being said? I did a ceremony a couple of years ago where I went over with the officiant how it was going to end and when the ceremony music was going to begin, or the recessional music was going to begin. And he gave it to me and I said, okay, but I didn't have a script. And at the end, he pronounced them husband and wife. And I queued up the music and awesome. And then he looks over at me and goes, wait. Let us pray. And then he did a prayer. Now it really was awful. It looked like I really screwed up. And afterwards I asked him about it and he was like, oh yeah, it was fine. No, it's not fine. You made me look like an idiot because I specifically asked you how it was going to end and then you did this. But they don't care about those things. We do. So knowing what the last words they're going to say are helps you when you're going to do it. We oftentimes, with our ceremonies, we frequently have the music begin on the kiss. If you're going to do that, then you have to have the last words either already said or make sure you've got an instrumental loop so that the officiant can, pronounce them after the kiss and they walk away and then you cue to the part of the music they're going to walk off to. Knowing if there are any surprise moments is a really key thing. The bride and groom didn't tell you there's going to be a sand ceremony or a candle ceremony, and those are times when a nice little bed of soft music playing during that keeps it from being awkward. But they don't tell you. Sometimes the bride and groom don't even know some of these things that are going to happen. Usually they do, but again, if it's in the script, it's easy to know that. Sometimes there are things that are said during the ceremony that you can use during the reception for later. Just a line that was used or something that was funny, and being able to incorporate that later is really helpful. If you know about it in advance, it gives you more time to prepare and maybe come up with a really cool creative idea. Conversely, because I do love stories at a lot of our receptions, one of the things I discovered some time back is that I've had clients who've given my love story information sheet filled out to the officiant. The officiant then basically tells their story, but of course it's not funny or entertaining, just all of the key parts are in there, so anything I'm telling for the love story later sounds very repetitive. Whether you're doing a love story or not, it's important to know what things they've already done, because you may have to adjust what you're saying afterwards because of what's being done by the officiant. Here's a wild thing that's never happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to some of you out there, but again, just being prepared. If you have a script in advance of what the ceremony is to be and the officiant doesn't show up, then I know a lot of you, like myself, are ordained as officiants and are licensed to perform ceremonies. You could step in and give them the specific ceremony that they were planning on. Now, I know you could just step in and do one generically, but it would be great if you could do that specific one. And if not you, there may be somebody else there who could do it. Along that same line, I can't even begin to tell you the number of times I've had an officiant show up without their own script. And they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot the script. Well, I've got it on my phone. And they're reading it off their phone, right? Which is just horrible. Having it in advance gives me a spare copy. I'll bet you 5 or 6 times, it's not like it happens every weekend, but I bet you 5 or 6 times over the years, I've given a copy of the ceremony script, and I do them in like big letters, easy to read, to the officiant. Like, oh my gosh. And it's the same reason we get scripts of wedding toasts and whenever possible. Lots of times they forget them, and instead they're trying to read off their phone or remember it, and I've got a copy of it for them. This seems like an odd one, but again, 5 or 6 times over the years, I've had a ceremony script in advance, and they've got the wrong names in it. Maybe you have the right name at the beginning, and then partway through where they did they just did a search and replace, but it was Michael, but now it's Mike, and so it didn't catch that, and they've got the wrong name in the script. So I've been able to go, it's really not Mike at this reception. This is Jim. So, thanks for catching that. So a little thing like that. Now, nobody knows, but, you really saved the day. And one of the simple ones is just knowing the real length of the ceremony. Much like photographers often say, 5 minutes, and then they're gone for 45 minutes. The officiant will typically say, a 15 or 20 minute ceremony. Well, let's find out how long they're talking, because maybe they're talking for 20 minutes, but they haven't included in that 20-minute time, the processional and the recessional and the length of, they're doing a candle lighting ceremony or a sand ceremony or hand fasting or roses to the moms, any of the things that can go on. So the 20 minutes is talking time, but the actual ceremony is 35 minutes, and that may change the whole timeline for the day, for everything that goes on. So lots of reasons to do it. There's no reason not to get it. Now, how difficult is it to get? Depends on who you're getting it from. What I've discovered is that amateurs are pretty good about getting them to you in advance. Professionals are not, sadly. Now, it's not always the case, but professionals are funny, especially like the rent-a an officiant, and mostly the online officiants who do this as a little sideline kind of a thing. They're protective. It's like, this is my ceremony. I don't want anybody to have it. Like, shut up, I'm recording the whole thing anyway, right? If you're worried about me having it, I'm going to have it. The only difference is having it in advance means I can do it. So you have to sometimes sort of ease your way into getting that. I go through the bride and groom for it. I give them the reasons why I want it, and going through them makes it a lot easier. I find it's virtually impossible if I'm in a church getting it from like a real pastor, priest. Forget it, never going to happen. Sometimes pastors will do it, but they seem to be on these power trips and oftentimes won't do it. But again, mostly we're not in churches. Mostly we're at, people that are having us do the ceremony are typically not doing super religious ceremonies. There's some exceptions to that, but it's not, you just have to go through a couple of steps. And I always go through the bride and groom first, tell them I would like to get a copy of the script and why, and ask them if they would let their officiant know, and then I get the contact information, and usually it's pretty easy. I sometimes just get them saying, well, what do you want it for? And I go, listen, it's just a number. I don't go through this whole list with them, but I go, the more I know, the better. It's just easy for us to follow along. Sometimes you're doing something that I may be able to use later in the ceremony, or in the reception rather. So I may give them a couple of little things like that, but I don't. If the pros, I don't go into you might forget something because, I never forget anything. I've been doing this a long time. You get the ego comes into play. So hopefully that helps. My minute is almost up, so it's time to sign off and see you next week.